And welcome everyone to God's Views on Political News. It's great to have you here with us today. Remember to please ask us anything, any questions, and any comments during the live show. Perfectly fine. We want to say before we get started that our hearts and our prayers go out to those victims and their families in the shooting that happened, a horrific shooting over the weekend on Saturday at the Tree of Life Synagogue. And I know the president and the first lady are on their way there today. Not everybody is welcoming them, but I hope with the spirit of God that people could open their hearts and their minds today and allow that to allow the president of the United States and the first lady to come there and give their condolences. Any
Well said.
comments, Bill?
Well said. Well, it's just a very sad thing, and it just, I don't know. The world's gone crazy. The world's gone crazy, and people who have this hatred and bitterness just toward people just because of their religion or their ethnicities. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around sometimes, and particularly among those who say they're Christian and who look at Jews as being enemies just because they're Jews. It's beyond me. And some of the folks that are listening and watching and know what I do understand what I'm saying, because one of the main things I do is I try to teach about the Jewishness of the Messiah and the Hebraic origins and nature and influence of what brought about what we call Christianity today. So it's just, it's very sad.
It is very sad. And
that's an understatement, I know, but.
And we're going to talk more about the synagogue and the shooting and what's been going on in a few minutes. But I wanted to start out with what seems to be the hot topic of the day, the breaking news that came out this morning, that President Trump is looking to sign an executive order to basically make the automatic citizenship of babies that come here and are born, or people who come here illegally and have babies born in the United States, what they refer to as anchor babies. He's trying to say we want to get rid of that. That should never be allowed, and that's under the 14th Amendment, and that's not what the 14th Amendment was all about. Your thoughts a little bit on just that, the president signing an executive order. I know people on the left are already complaining about it, but they weren't complaining. I know.
Really? Oh my
gosh.
I can't believe it. Oh my Lord.
But they didn't complain when former President Obama, was signing executive orders about DACA. That was okay.
I know. It's, how it is. There are some more equal than others,
That's right. Yeah.
So
we learned at an animal farm.
You're right. First of all, across the board, I'm not a fan of executive orders, simply because I just don't think that's the way it should be done. I don't think that's the way the founders intended it to be done. So I'm not a fan of executive orders in general. That being said, we live in a world of executive orders now. And so to me, this is just kind of following in the footsteps of those who've kind of set the tone for how things are done. It's just now it's going to come back and bite people, potentially anyway. It's going to come back and bite people who don't like the idea of writing the misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment. I would prefer that it be done through Congress. My initial reaction was Trump is pushing buttons again, and perhaps it's I'm going to do an executive order in Congress. Really, you need to take care of this. Right. You need to do this. That's just my impression. So I'm all for setting the record straight. And by the way, Lindsey Graham, once again, is coming out and saying it's about time somebody did something about this. And I'm like,
who is he?
Who is this guy? An alien has snatched his body and replaced it with some conservative alien. Now, anyway.
I call it Lindsay 2.0, and I like the new Lindsay.
Right. At least, sometimes. Yeah. Anyway, I'm all for closing this loophole because it's ridiculous. It's just a magnet to draw illegals here. I mean, you want to come in the right way, do the right thing, take steps to be a naturalized citizen and you have a baby here, hey, no problem. I don't have an issue with that whatsoever. But you're going to, come across the border, break down fences, or threaten to do this, that, and the other, just so you can get into the borders and have a baby, so they can be, no, that's wrong. It needs to be fixed. I just would prefer it would be done through Congress.
Yeah, and I want to, before we go on further, I want to say hello to everybody that's coming in: Darlene, Chezzy, Marlene, Linda, Bethany, Robin, Beth, and all the other people. Dawn, I know I'm going to miss some names, but thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
What I wanted to say too is, you're absolutely right. Congress should have taken care of DACA. Congress should have taken care of what's going on down at with the Caravan coming in right now. Congress should have taken care of this birthright citizenship a long time ago, and they've done absolutely nothing. This president has gone out. He's asked legal counsel, is this something that I can do by executive order? And the only reason we're having to do so many executive orders is because Congress isn't acting.
I agree.
That's exactly what it is.
I agree.
And so with this, people are saying, oh my gosh, he's changing the 14th Amendment. Oh my gosh, he wants to override it. Oh my gosh, he's a dictator. That's, of course, coming from the left. And it isn't. All he's saying is, basically what he's saying is, I want to enforce the provisions that we have here. Now, I want to read to you what the 14th Amendment says. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof,
meaning legal,
are citizens of the United States and of the state where they reside. And so he's not saying I want to get rid of the 14th Amendment. He is just saying I want to enforce the part that says subject to the jurisdiction, meaning that you are here, like you said, legally, and therefore your children born here are going to be citizens as well. It is that, but the left always takes and twists things, twists the words, twists the meanings. We want to look back at what the person Senator Jacob Howard, who was involved in drafting that original meaning of the 14th Amendment. Here's what he said: that the 14th Amendment will not include persons born in the U.S. who are foreigners, aliens, who belong to the families of ambassadors of foreign ministers accredited to the government of the United States, but will include every other class of persons. It's very clear here. He's saying, you aliens, foreigners who come here, illegally, not subject to the jurisdiction, you're not included in the 14th Amendment.
Right. So, again, it would be preferable for Congress to do their job, and somebody just reminded us that Congress sucks air.
Was that Marlene?
No, that was
Linda.
That was Linda. It would be preferable for Congress to do this, so there wouldn't be any question about it. Yeah, that being said, you know what? We've already kind of smashed the barriers, between the separation of powers. So as I can't believe I'm about to say this. So if we're going to have an executive order to kind of right the wrong, okay, let's do it. Maybe that'll force Congress to do what they're supposed to do and establish it legislatively. And who knows, if in a week from today, the Republicans hold the House and Jim Jordan becomes Speaker of the House, maybe he'll do what he said. Maybe he'll actually start implementing some of these things and take action and do things that Paul Ryan and John Boehner and others wouldn't do, So we'll see.
Well, and look at this right now. That if you take this on its face value and you believe that what the president is doing as an executive order isn't changing the 14th Amendment, that it's just clarifying it, you don't need Congress for that.
I would agree with that. I'm just saying that it reinforces the mindset among so many people, most of them uninformed, that the president has all this power that he can wield, and with the stroke of pen, he can do this, he can do that, i.e. DACA and Obama, and those, the president can do this, even though he had already consented that he didn't really have the power to do that because he wasn't a king, and yet he went out and did it anyway, and nobody in Congress challenged him on it. So I'm all for righting wrongs. I'm all for this president leading very strongly. He's, he, again, in my view, he's pushing buttons.
Yeah.
He's pushing buttons. We're going to fix this. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he even said, Congress can do this. So that to me was like, he's saying, okay, Congress, get up off your backside and do your job so that we don't have these issues.
Right. Now, Darlene said executive orders can be rescinded, and that's true.
That's right.
Though, if you believe that the 14th Amendment is very clear, and you take and you rescind that executive order, nothing has changed about the 14th Amendment. It is what it is, and it's just the way that maybe the courts want to interpret it, or the left wants to interpret it, or however else. But it would be the best if Congress came out, it's not even an amendment. They might have to do an amendment, but putting in an interpretation that this is clearly what it means. Right. It means the same back in 1866 or whenever it was that this guy first said this, helped write the 14th Amendment, and it means the same thing today. It does not apply to illegal aliens or foreigners that come here that are here illegally.
Well, as soon as he signs this order, if he does, as soon as he signs it, what's going to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
The Ninth Circuit is going to put a stay on it, it's going to be a big court battle, which gets into another one of my little issues with our the way things are run presently, and the judiciary has way too much power. But nevertheless, it's going to be a fight in the courts, and so once again, we're back to Congress needs to do this and do it right. And if it really shouldn't have to be that it has to be clarified, but here's what happens. And I'm going to bring the Bible into this. God says this, he told Moses to write that, the Messiah said this. And now we live in a day where it's always been this way, but it's, 100 times worse now. We twist, we contort, we stretch, we massage what God said, what Moses said, what the Messiah said, to get it to fit what we want to do. For instance, and I'm not trying to change topics here, but I've heard this argument, Jesus never actually said anything about homosexuality. Well, no, he didn't. However, he did say, you can't add to, you can't take away, not one jot or tittle is going to be taken away from the scripture until all is fulfilled. So no, he didn't say anything specifically about that, but he definitely endorsed what had already been written. So my point, we twist and we contort it, and people exploit others' ignorance of what it actually says and what it's supposed to mean to convince people that, he's going to override the 14th Amendment. They're saying that out of either ignorance or just because they don't want to let go of what they want the world to be.
Well, and they want to make the definition, like you said, what they want it to be, and they want you to believe that is the definition, and that you're wrong if you believe otherwise. Now, as you're saying, if he signs this executive order, it's going to immediately go to the Court of Appeals and the injunction. The ACLU came out and it already said this is blatantly unconstitutional attempt to fan the flames of anti-immigrant hatred in the days ahead of the midterms. They've already set the groundwork. Hey, Hassan.
I think the only hatred that's being provoked here is the growing, I hate to use the word hatred, but people toward the ACLU, Code Pink, Freedom from Religion Foundation, progressives, liberals in general, and these kinds of people who are what's the word I'm trying to find here that's somewhat civil, who are just lying through their teeth.
Yeah.
And I think people are sick of it. I know I am, and I'm trying to be a sincere follower of the Messiah and do things the right way and say things the right way. But I keep going back to the fact that he chased those people out of the temple with a whip because they crossed the line. And at some point, we need to love people, we need to care about people, but sometimes we need to realize that the truth is this, and sometimes you have to angrily present the truth. And I'm hopeful that a week from now, people will, take that frustration right straight to the voting booths.
Yeah, I hope so too. And one thing that concerns me when the ACLU comes out this quickly against the president, we have this whole Honduran caravan and continuing to grow, continuing to be more violent. I mean, I know the left would not agree with me when I use the word violent, but throwing rocks and throwing sticks and trying to break down fences, that's violence to me.
Look, you take a picture of this, people in this caravan, and I realize that probably not all fit into this category.
Correct.
But take pictures of those guys that were pushing that fence down, throwing rocks, and compare it to a picture of these 20-somethings, the Antifa and the anarchists that are marching in Portland and Seattle and other places. Compare the two. Tell me the difference.
Yeah, it's violence is violence. I mean, and so as these people march forward, and we're hearing that new people are joining the caravan, new people are coming from other countries to join the caravan and swelling to God only knows what numbers. And then we hear other things saying, oh, but some of them are breaking up and they're going back, and they're being lied to by their government. Some of them are. They're being told, go to America. Everything will be there waiting for you. We had a guy in the group who said, look, I committed, it's an attempted murder. I've been convicted of it, and I'm going to the United States to get a pardon. Okay, so we know there are felons in the group because of that guy's a felon.
Probably some pregnant women who are due to deliver anytime now.
Absolutely. And then you've got other people that are maybe MS-13, cartel, on and on and on, and mixed in with innocent people. Sex traffickers, also pedophiles. And one of the children I know the other day, they were saying one of the children had been kidnapped from the migrants, and they were kind of trying to find the child. I don't know if they ever did or not. Yeah. My concern is, we have people coming out. Yesterday, there was a news conference saying, look, we're sending 5,200 people to the border. We're going to put the Constantina wire there, which is, razor blades on wires. We can stretch that for 22 miles. Good. You may need to stretch it further. And we're putting up barricades and on and on and on. My concern is you let those people touch one toe into the United States. You've got the ACLU out there saying, this is cruel. Look at the wires. You've got the TV crews out there, liberals, everybody. Oh, they're killing children. They're separating children. President Trump said we're going to have nice tents. Oh, the tents aren't going to be good enough. It's going to be, I think, a disaster. We need to keep these people off of American soil so that we don't have the ACLU. We don't have problems about birthright citizenship and everything else.
I don't think there's anything anyone could do to satisfy the left other than concede.
Yeah.
So there is no making nice with them. I don't think compromise is even possible at this point. I'm not talking about people who are moderate and civil. I'm talking about the left, the radicals, the progressives, who seem to make up, it would seem anyway, the majority of the Democratic Party at this point in time. Now, that's just my opinion. I don't think there's any way to make nice with them. My point is this. If they're going to raise Cain anyway, go ahead and give them a reason to. Go ahead and just do what's right. Put a stop to this. Use force if necessary, and that would be very unfortunate, I realize, but there comes a point in time that you say, you know what, if you're going to invade us, we're going to defend our borders. I would really hate for it to become that way. I think there are people in this country that would love for it to become violent, because that would give the headlines and the news footage that they want to try to drive things in another direction, and then at the same time tweet out that we are not enemies of the state, but that we are Americans. We're all on the same team. No, we're not. We're not. Not if you're trying to destroy the rule of law, and that's my opinion of some of these people. So all of that is to say, I agree with you. Giving any concession is going to be potentially. It's going to potentially backfire. I'm just hopeful with the troops that are going down there, with what I'm hearing coming out of the White House is that they have a plan to put a stop to this. We shall see.
Now, Linda said, compare it to the Palestinians approaching Israel's fence, trying to push it down and throwing rocks. Israel would take care of the problem hands down. I mean, even if people got killed, if they felt that they were going to be, you know, lobbing explosives in or,
Yeah.
you know, things like that, they would take care of it.
Well, Israel can't afford to take any chances.
Mm-hmm.
They're a nation about the size of New Jersey. They can't afford to take any chances. And on top of that, the Palestinians, and I use that term, you know, very broadly, have shown that they are A, willing to strap explosives to their children, or B, give power to people who are willing to strap explosives to their children. And so either way you look at it, Israel can't afford to be nice. And Israel has, in my view, has for years, for decades, gone above and beyond being nice and conciliatory. But there comes a point in time they just can't afford to take chances. Personally, I feel that, and I've got my political cap on right now. I'll put my Bible cap back on in just a second. We're at a place, as far as this nation, if it's going to continue to be a constitutional republic, we're at a place that we cannot afford to be nice with anarchists and the lawless. We have to take a stand. Hopefully that avoids bloodshed, but I think the lawless and the anarchists are actually pushing for that. That's what they want.
Absolutely.
Right? Now I'm going to put my Bible cap back on, my believer cap back on. As these people come here, you know, there is going to be a conflict. There are going to be issues. And among those radicals, there are probably people who are genuinely just trying to escape tyranny, who want a better life, who are destitute, who need help. And as believers, we need to figure out a way to, without relaxing our laws, without conceding and what is right in this regard, as far as the borders, we also need to be those that in love reach out and try to help those people, not by letting them come in illegally, but give them what they need so that they can start making their way back to their house. So that's how I see it.
Well, there's also a law that if you're looking for asylum, you've got to seek asylum in the country that you first enter into that will offer you asylum. That's Mexico. And if they really were truly looking for asylum, they could find it right there in Mexico. And they've offered them to give them jobs, they've offered to feed them and clothe them and all that. So that would be us helping them, is saying, obey the laws, stay in Mexico, obey the law that, this is the first country, they're offering you asylum, take it. Either that or go back to your own country. And we help Mexico. We give plenty of financial aid to Mexico. So we can, they get our assistance that way too. Now, Dawn says for all those people that the ACLU, let the ACLU take them in. They're the ones trying to stop the president. They want the birthright citizenship not to go through. And so let them stay there. And Linda said blatant worms. No, not coming underground, but rallying others. I think that's when we were talking about the liberal left. This left will never be satisfied until this country is controlled by them, and that mob will be the life in this country, Marlene said. Darlene said the Pentagon was very specific about the plan and what is going to happen. They didn't mention tent cities. They said asylum was offered by Mexico and rejected. It nullifies U.S. asylum according to our law. And that's, that'll be challenged too when you let them touch foot on our soil.
Read what my wife put down there. I thought that was pretty good too. See that?
I was told last night, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Read that.
Okay. I was told last night a ranger in Gatlinburg had to yell to the crowd, "I'm not hurting the bear." So the crowd didn't turn on him while he tried to save them from the bear. Wow. Now that's frightening, Bill. That's frightening. That's biblically frightening right there. Seriously.
Well, that's what's going on in this country at large. You've got people who are going on emotion, not fact, not the rule of law. We talked about that. I think we talked about that a lot last week. So I thought that was pretty clever. My wife's pretty clever.
Well, somebody in the family has to. No, I'm just
somebody has to be. That's right.
The thing of it is when Bethany said that, it reminds me of people who just follow like sheep. And these people, they're not using their brains. I mean, this guy is trying to save them from a bear, and they're yelling at him to stop, even though they're going to be killed. And it's like it's going off the cliff. They would do that. The sheep just go right off the cliff. And I think we've in the United States, in a lot of respects, we have gone right off the cliff in a lot of areas, and are still going to be going even further there. And Marlene said, I think best words are prophetic. I do too, Marlene. I'm not making a joke about that. I believe that.
Well, there are some believers who are taking the position, or at least it seems this way, that, Jesus would let them in and he would feed them and all those kinds of things. And I'm all for being compassionate, and I'm all for being helpful. It's been a long time since I've changed bread and fish, multiplied it to feed 5,000 men, women, plus women and children. I haven't done that lately. So I realize that I can't just walk down to the border and make that happen. There are things I think that believers can do and that Americans can do to try to help these people, but we're not going to help them by allowing them to behave. And in their first step into this country is an act of lawlessness. That doesn't help them, because it doesn't help us. The only way we are going to be in a position to help those people in Honduras and Guatemala and Mexico and other places abroad is if we are a strong and secure nation that abides by its laws, and most importantly, biblical law, because the nation whose God is the Lord is a blessed nation. And then we become a source of blessing for others. So going back to what Beth said, we're not hurting the bear.
Yeah.
We're trying to protect people from the bear, to save people from the bear. And if we save the people from the bear, then we can put the bear in a situation where the bear can be taken care of as well.
Right. Well, and one thing that always sticks out in my mind, the Holy Spirit gave us discernment. And when you're looking at a crowd of people that are, 7,000, 14,000, however many there are, when they're carrying their flag of their country and singing their country song, as saying that we're leaving this country because we're tortured and everything else, but you're carrying their flag, you're singing their song, and you're marching towards our borders and saying, nothing's going to stop us. The law's not going to stop us. Nobody's going to stop us. We're coming there. To me, as I said, God gave us the, discernment that we're supposed to use. If you see a bear, it could be a bear, and if you see a crowd of people that look like that they're coming to invade, it could be an invasion, So,
well, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and I'm just saying that for people to say it's otherwise, for people to say no problem, it's okay. They don't know any more than we know whether or not it's truly an invasion. We know that it's very suspect. And we need to judge that, and we need to look at it before we say, oh, come on in.
If somebody was marching onto my property saying your gates are not going to stop me, your doors and locks are not going to stop me from coming in, my gates and doors might not stop them, but my 357 would.
Yeah.
So the point is, my family comes first, Yeah. I'm going to take care of my wife and my kids, my family, my home comes first. Now, if you're in need and we're aware of it and we're in a position to help you, even though my family comes first, we're going to try to help you.
Exactly.
Okay. But you don't barge in. And if I want to invite you into my house and have a meal with me, that's my prerogative, and you abide by the rules of my house. I don't really understand what's so hard to figure out here. The same thing is true with the nation. We take care of our people first. We take care of our nation first. So many people were losing their minds because Trump said that he's a nationalist. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with being a nationalist. There's a big difference between that and what Hitler and the Nazis were all about. Their nationalism was you had to be an Aryan, and and at this percentage level, and everybody else was mongrels and dogs. He's not saying that, and no one that is in his administration. I haven't heard anybody say that. We're just whatever race and ethnicity and background you're from. If you're an American, then we're going to put this nation first. And yeah, we'll still help all these other nations. We'll still help those people who are oppressed, who are downtrodden, who are in need. But you're not going to just barge into our house. And I really admire the president for thus far taking a stand in that regard.
Well, and you make a good point. Right now, the word nationalist, for all those people who are rational, what that means is you protect and love your country. And
Right.
that's what the president has always said. But if you're on the liberal left, nationalist now equals white supremacy. And so they've taken and changed the definition. I'm serious.
I know, I know. I'm just laughing because I'm remembering somebody saying something to the effect. I think it was Joe Scarborough said something about that Trump's tweeting about baseball was a signal to all of the white supremacists out there. I thought, good grief, this is
It's a
getting
dog whistle.
It's
It's a
getting
dog whistle.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Hey, let me interrupt just real quick. I want to say something. There is a young lady who signed on, Heather Omran.
Uh-huh.
Heather was in my youth group when Beth and I were youth pastors in Florida. Oh
Wow.
goodness, what was it, 30 years ago? So I just wanted to say hello to Heather.
Nice.
Wow, she's
Thank
a
you for
grown.
joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. She's grown, got children of her own now. So I really feel old all of a sudden. Thanks,
Wow.
Heather.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
Thanks for making me feel old.
Now, Luann said if Trump took them in and fed them from his own money, people would still hate him. America, get a clue. Absolutely, Luann. There is nothing, and I repeat, nothing that President Trump could do that would ever be okay and enough for the people on the left. They don't want him here. He's the only thing standing in between right now, other than God, the world, the United States becoming a globalist society with open borders, and they can't stand that, and they'll do whatever they have to do to get rid of him. And I've heard pastors say that they fear that even to the point of assassinating him if need be, and that's just absolutely over the top disgusting.
I was last night I was reading some things, and that's what came to mind. And I felt like, you know what, we really, really need to pray for the president and his family, because I think for the first time in this whole election cycle, here's what I'm starting to feel in my heart. That the left is going to get really surprised about what happens. I'm not saying God told me this. I'm just saying I'm just feeling this in my heart. I think they're going to be really surprised at what happens. I think it's going to become apparent that more and more they have less and less power and hold. And that is going to force them to take even more dramatic, even more radical action. And so we really need to be praying for the president, his family, those that are in his administration, even the press secretary, people like that, because I think that some of these people on the left are losing it. In Volusia County, by the way, where Heather and I first met down in Daytona area, we met in DeLand, but over on the coast in Daytona, I'm sure you know that the Republican headquarters there in South Daytona, people drove by and shot the place up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not surprised that happened in Daytona, but it's just showing you that more and more the radical left are becoming more radical. It's getting out of hand.
Is getting out of hand now. Bethany said, Alan quotes Teddy Roosevelt. There is only room enough for one mindset here, and that is the American mindset. Room for one language and the English language and one flag, and that is the American flag. So Teddy Roosevelt, in other words, would be called a bigot today. That was Alan's point. I'm taking. No, I'm just kidding.
No, Alan is a very, very staunch nationalist here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm just teasing. But when you're talking,
who's learning Spanish?
Nice.
Who's learning Spanish? So
cool.
Just to kind of cover our bases here.
Muy bueno, Alan. So the one thing that when you're talking about that and the left is going crazy and maybe coming after the president, there was a character actor named James Cromwell who told Variety during an interview that there would be blood in the streets if Republicans remain in control after the midterm elections. Those are Those are really harsh words. Really harsh words.
I not for the same reason he said it, but I wouldn't disagree with that statement.
Mm-hmm.
But and just because of what I said, that if the radicals are losing their grip on power, they're going to resort to even more radical action. And I'm not necessarily saying that there will be an organized violent movement, but I think that there are people who are prone to violence already. And I realize that the pipe bomb guy is supposed to be a registered Republican and a big Trump supporter and all that kind of stuff. And even though some things put a question mark in my mind about all of that, okay, let's just say he is. I've not heard one level-headed conservative voice any kind of support for what he did. It's all been condemnation across the board. Anyway.
I'm laughing because Alan was correcting me, and it was muy bien and not muy bueno. So.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Alan. All right. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I agree with what he said. Now he's saying it because we need to stop Trump. I'm saying that if God has purpose for this man to be here and for things to happen, that the corruption in our culture be exposed, and that continues, then I believe that there will be blood in the street, because that will be the enemy and the adversary kind of being backed into a corner, and he'll resort to violence.
Yeah, Don said, I think we're looking at a mess no matter how the turn is, how it turns out at the election. Fight fire with fire, Jonathan said. Praying, Beth, let's hope Obama's visit gives you the lead you need. And I saw an ad offering people money to come to his rally. That's in Florida. I think what I see is, there's definitions are changing. The liberal left is changing definitions to fit whatever they want to make it fit into their agenda, by calling nationalists now white supremacists, by looking at language and blaming the president of the United States for his rhetoric causing that hoax bomber. And let's just face it, those bombs they weren't going to go off. They were kind of hoaxes. I don't know if the guy is mentally ill and he didn't know how to make them work, or he made them look like bombs. I don't know. Thank God nobody died and nobody got hurt from any of those things. Could have been much, much worse. But to blame the president of the United States for what that man did, with all the 13 people that he sent those packages to blame the president for an anti-Semitic man, I'll say man, that went into the synagogue and killed 11 innocent people, including one woman who had survived the Holocaust, and was sitting in the synagogue, believing probably that day that she was safe there. That's over the top, blaming the president and saying his rhetoric. Most of the rhetoric from the president is, that they're fake news. This person, he called Gillum a thief. Because of what the FBI, buying the tickets with the FBI and taking bribes or whatever you want to look at it, whatever words you want to say. But they're using those words now and calling them political violence and attaching them to the Republicans and to the president, and saying now that anything that happens, the president and sooner or later, all of us, the Republican and Sarah Sanders, are responsible for what happens, what other people's behaviors are.
Well, first of all, anybody that's going to make a pipe bomb, whether it's designed to explode or not, is mentally unstable.
Right.
Anybody that's going to go into a house of worship and shoot up unarmed people, or who's going to fire on unarmed congressmen who are playing softball, they're unhinged. So it really doesn't matter if they're with a D or an R behind their name. Anybody who would do anything like that is mentally unstable, is violent, criminal, whatever, and need to be dealt with. And as far as I'm concerned, the guy that shot up those people in the synagogue, he ought to be tried, and when found guilty, sent straight to the execution chamber. Now that's how I feel about it. and I realize that, some people, oh, we're believers. We're not, because we don't believe in that. Yeah, I do. I believe that things like that need to be squashed. Let them pray right before they flip the switch or do whatever it is they do. But, I believe in capital punishment. And this is one of those situations that I believe that is absolutely warranted. All right. So, but let's go back to, blaming Trump. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that his son-in-law is an Orthodox Jew. Pretty certain that his daughter converted to Judaism. And by the way, isn't he the president that moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem?
Yeah.
So the anti-Semitic,
grandchildren are Jewish.
Right. So anti-Semitic, give me a break. Now, are a lot of Jews in the United States liberal to the point that they didn't want the embassy moved to Jerusalem? Absolutely. Are there Jewish people in America who are so liberal and so progressive in their politics that they actually are advocates for the PLO and Hamas and these other terrorist groups in the so-called territories? Absolutely. So if he's coming against their agenda, in their mind, that makes him anti-Semitic. Yeah. But, anything he does or doesn't do, they so despise the man. They're going to try to twist it somehow.
Yeah. And they're saying now, well, there wasn't this hatred towards Jews until President Trump came along with his rhetoric and it's like, where have you been living? What cave did you live in? And we know that's not true, but I tell you what is true. I think there is more hatred towards the Jews now because of President Trump. And that's because President Trump loves Israel, supports Israel, and moved our embassy to Jerusalem. And so if you hate Jews, you're going to hate President Trump even more and the Jews even more because of that.
He is being used. It's, whether he's intending to do this, I don't know. But nonetheless, he's being used to expose all these kinds of things. I was thinking the other day, you and I have kind of at least a couple of years history here. And so, that I was not on board for Trump. And I was thinking just the other day, the Jim Acostas and all these other people have turned me into a Trump fan.
You're going to have a MAGA hat the next time.
I'm like, oh my gosh, look what's happened to me. And it's not so much that I advocate his certain things in his personal life, because I don't. It's just that as he's doing things that I believe are right, personally, he is exposing all this corruption and all this viciousness among some of these people. And it's like, God, I really see your wisdom in all this. And that has kind of made me a supporter. And I can't even believe I'm saying that, but it just came out of my mouth. So anyway.
But you don't have to even say with President Trump, I don't like some of the things, I don't advocate for some of the things that he says or does, because isn't that true about every single person? Isn't that true about every single one of us? Of
course it is. Of course it is.
I don't feel the need to have to say that about President Trump. I may disagree with him, but I don't need to point that out whenever I talk about President Trump. There are a lot of people that continue to talk about, his rhetoric, or they'll say, well, he's the president and he needs to not do that and say that. Let me just take a moment here and kind of refresh everybody's memory. And you tell me where this came from. They bring a knife. We bring a gun. I want you to argue with them and get in their face. Hit back twice as hard. I talk to these folks so I know who's to kick. Okay. Starts with an A. Punish our enemies. I'm itching for a fight. Now, nobody came out and said anything about Obama when he said those things. Jim Acosta, who I believe has a daddy complex, he really needs President Trump's attention. he was not saying anything about Obama then. That was perfectly okay. He was looked at as like, oh wow, he's a strong leader. President Trump says it, and all of a sudden, it's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah. Hey, can I throw another one into those quotes?
Yeah.
I know. They all look alike.
Yeah, Hillary said that.
Can you believe that? And nobody's saying anything.
Can I tell you that I brought that up on Twitter when she said that? She was talking, for those who don't know, the lady was interviewing Hillary. I don't know who she was. And she said, she mistakenly said Cory Booker's name instead of Eric Holder. She confused the two of who said something. Hillary Clinton said, yeah, I know, it's easy to do because they all look alike. I sat there on Twitter and I'm like, this is you call this a joke? I mean, people, this is racist. This isn't funny to me. And people, liberals, were defending her and coming after me saying, look, lady, it's just a joke. I couldn't believe my ears that they were defending her for her racist.
Well, once again, Susan, some are more equal than others. So,
Wow.
well, where Trump is concerned, again, I stand by the fact that I believe that God has put him in this position. It doesn't mean that that's an endorsement of everything he does and says. He's serving God's purposes, and more and more, I see it as exposing all of this stuff. It's the things we always knew, always suspected, but now there's no denying it. It's out there in the open. So, a few years ago, I have to confess something here. A few years ago, I was just, where voting is concerned, I was just like, oh, good grief. Do I want a bullet to the head or a cyanide capsule? I don't feel that way this time. And I really believe that God is trying to do something. I won't pretend to know everything he's trying to do. I don't know that it's about making America great again. I don't know. It may be. But I know that God is doing something. And so we've been given a garden like Adam was, and we've been told to tend it, work in it. And we've been told to guard it and protect it because God has entrusted it to us to serve his purposes. And when its purpose has come to fruition and he's done with it, then he can do whatever he wants. But in the meantime, it's our responsibility to defend it. And so I was wrong before in my view, and I'm trying to correct that we need to do what is in our power to do that is godly within the boundaries that Scripture has set down to defend that which God has entrusted to us. First, our homes, our families, and, whatever else he's entrusted to us personally. And, our towns, our municipalities, and our states. I mean, Georgia, I think Beth mentioned this earlier, and I'm sure most everybody is aware. My home state of Georgia, where I grew up, where Beth and I grew up, has a socialist running for governor. Florida, where Heather Omran and her family lives. By the way, Heather, make sure you tell Mark I said hello. They have a socialist running for governor there. And the crazy thing is, it's kind of nobody's really sure how this is all going to turn out.
I know.
That's
scary.
That's where we're at. And it's because, and I'll take part of the blame here, is because we've kind of taken a hands-off attitude toward protecting the garden that the Creator has entrusted to us. And we need to right that wrong. And maybe God's given us an opportunity to do that. And using someone who is at times very vulgar, profane, caustic, abrasive, rough around the edges, says things that makes us cringe, to prove a point that if I can use him, and he's not afraid of all these people, why are my people intimidated by them?
Well, and that what you just described, I would much rather have that than somebody on the liberal left who is basically waiting to put a knife in my back anytime that they so choose, and for America, doing the same thing. And I'm sorry if that description was too violent for some people, but I'm just saying that's what they're doing. And I would much rather have somebody who loved this country, who was trying to protect this country, who cussed every now and then, who was vulgar every now and then, than somebody who was trying to destroy this country and tries to pretend that they're all prim and proper most of the time. Now, Robin said, I told Susan the other day that I'm on the Trump train and didn't vote for him, but I will now. So we forgive you and Robin for being late.
Wait a minute now. I happen to know some things.
I've said this before. I was for Ted Cruz until Ted dropped out. And then I prayed, as I told you before, my husband and I prayed 3 days straight. Should we vote for President Trump?
I'm just messing with you.
No, I know. And I thank God that I listened and voted for him, and I don't regret it. Marlene said, God raises up and takes down authority. I'm not a trumpeter, but I am for his office of authority. Marlene said. Rachel said, the president is doing the job God put him here to do. Absolutely, Rachel. And Linda said, the light shines brightest in the dark. And excuse me, he knows what he is doing. God does. Absolutely. And Darlene said she is allowed to tell jokes. She's allowed to tell jokes, Darlene. We're talking about Hillary, I guess. I just find racist jokes aren't funny to me. Trump is the vessel that God is working through, so I'm for that, Marlene said. And Ronnie said the double standards, absolutely. In fact, wasn't Roseanne Barr thinking she was funny? No, Roseanne Barr doesn't. I don't think she thought she was funny when she said what she said. I think what she says was she was on some type of drug, and I think she was fighting back. I don't think she thought it was funny. They're all a basket of deplorables. They all look alike. Monique said, "Isn't that what Hillary said? Is that what you're talking about? What Hillary said?" And Susan mustn't question, just fall in line. Exactly, Linda. I always say there's no logic in liberals, so quit trying to use logic and you'll be better off. Monique said, God sees what's happening in the Middle East and Europe and in other countries. He chose a pillar of strength and courage to protect our nation. Absolutely. Rachel says again, praying like crazy. The Lord will save us from that evil woman. Amen to that. We're talking about Hillary. And Don said he got your attention, and that's one thing about Trump. He does get your attention, and you do listen to him. Marlene said we have all soaked up political correctness. We have to get back to calling truth the truth. I wrote an article about that the other day, where political correctness is always going to be our downfall, and we sit here and we allow the left again to keep us silent, telling us what we're saying is not politically correct, when what they say is 1,000 times worse than what we say. And Bethany said, stand for truth, brace for beheading because of it. And Stand for Truth, that's the name of my radio show. So thank you, Beth, for bringing that up. Just kidding. We're always mentioning Esau Rising. I thought I would get my
we do shameless plugs on here all the time. No. Hey, Linda said, look at Samson, Father used him. Here's why that jumped out at me. As soon as that came up, I've got a dog out here on my porch whose name is Samson. Oh. And he started barking. As soon as that came up. All right. And here's what popped in my head. Samson destroyed the enemies of God with the jawbone of a donkey. Yeah. Think about it. What are you trying to say? He took a donkey's jawbone, took what passed through the mouth of the donkey, and used it. So anyway, I get it. I don't know if anybody else is getting it.
I know I get it too, and I'm ignoring it. No, but we all know.
No, I'm being honest here. I'm being honest.
I know. No, but I was going to say, we all know, with President Trump. In the beginning, I didn't like some of the things that he was saying. This was when Ted Cruz was still in the running. But I soon realized why he has to say the things he does, why he says it in the way he does. You would not have taken him seriously. The world wouldn't have taken him seriously. The world would not have changed. We would have remained the same in this country had Donald Trump not been different, had God not been using this man who was different.
I agree. I had to get to a point to see action, and not just the words. And the actions that he's taken speak for themselves. And that's why I say that I see God's wisdom in this. I didn't in going into it. I do now. And we need to get beyond the politics of it and see God's purposes, and that's what I'm trying to do. I have times when it's really hard for me to get beyond what somebody says or does. Whether we're talking about blaming Trump for everything, including the extinction of dinosaurs. I'm exaggerating a little bit. This caravan, not much. This invasion force coming up from South America, all the shooting in Pittsburgh, which, by the way, I don't know, when is he scheduled to be there?
today.
Today? Oh, I know today, but is it?
But I don't know what time.
Okay, all right. You know, I've never seen in a long time. I've never seen a guy that works really hard like this guy does, and that says a lot to me. So it's what he's done that it's impressed me.
Yeah.
Not what he said. You know, that's left me kind of with my mouth agape. It's what he's done, and so that speaks louder than his tweets, as far as I'm concerned.
But isn't that how he's so different from other? Politicians are all talk and no do. He's the first one who's come along who's, a politician that is now doing something and putting his money where his mouth is, and promises made, promises kept.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the parable in the Gospels where, the father goes to the first son and he says, "Hey, I need you to work out in my field today." And he says, "Yeah, I'll go do it." And then he goes and doesn't do it. He doesn't go to work in the field. And then he comes to his second son who says, "Nah, why would I want to do that? I don't want to do that." But then he goes and he thinks better of it. And he says, "You know what? I need to go out and do what he asked me to do." So, the Messiah asked the question, who did the right thing? Was it the one who said, "Yeah, I'll do it," or the one who actually went out and did it? So it's apples and oranges, but this is the same thing to me.
Same thing.
It's easier for me to, ignore some of the things that he says, because when I look at what he's doing, the embassy, taking a stand for law and order, that speaks more to me and louder to me than some of his 30 a.m. tweets.
Yeah. Darlene said that moderation and compromise has gotten us nowhere. That's what they want us to return to. Yes. Anna said, "I prayed that Mr. Trump would be president and am praying for the USA for the next week's elections." Thank you, Anne. We appreciate that. Alan put Daniel chapter 2, verse 21. Karen said Trump was the only candidate tough enough to stand up to the deep state. And you're absolutely right, Karen. Ted Cruz wouldn't have been able to do it, as much as I liked Ted Cruz at the time. And there was no other person that could have stood up to the deep state. Just wouldn't have happened. They would have become part of the deep state or been overwhelmed by it. And Linda said she got the donkey remark. and Marlene said, "I don't think we need to abandon our gut feelings." And Darlene said, "I think many people ignore the fight and stay silent for fear of criticism and rejection." And, I've said, and I'm sure other people have said it too, we have to quit being afraid. We have to quit standing down and not saying we have to, anything. We need to speak up. If we don't do it, we're going to lose everything. Look at what's happened. This is totally off subject, but look at what happened to Gab. They took that platform totally off now because Gab, the guy who was accused of shooting the people in the synagogue, happened to have a profile page on Gab. He said anti-Semitic things. People could have blocked him if they wanted to. Gab immediately gave all the information to the FBI, didn't wait for the FBI to come to them. They went to the FBI, from what I understand. And so basically what happens, they are now taken off. Their internet provider, which is GoDaddy, is my understanding. They said, we're not going to put Gab on our system anymore. We're not going to be your provider. So they're having to look and try to find another provider as one more conservative voice gets taken off.
Well, God has never asked his people to do anything that it didn't require them to fight.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean necessarily conventionally. We're not warring against flesh and blood. We need to be reminded of that. I have to remind myself we're not fighting against Hillary Clinton and Cory Booker per se. We're fighting against principalities. And so,
evil darkness.
Yeah, right. But nonetheless, God has never asked his people to do something that he didn't say you're going to have to fight for it. You're going to have to contend for it. And so it's true today. If we do want morality, law to be restored and biblical standard, we're going to have to fight for it. And so apparently God has given us someone that is willing to fight.
And is willing to lead us in that fight.
Yeah, and we need to back him up in that.
Bethany says a friend and family are only that when you say what they want to hear. What do you really have? Exactly. Jonathan says it's time to get up and stand up and fight for our rights. And Monique said, I can't imagine a single Republican that will ever be able to fill Trump's shoes, just saying. And I think that's all amazingly true. And we are so out of time. I can't believe how fast this hour goes. Thank you so much for all of your comments today, all of your questions. We really appreciate them. Get out there and vote. Vote red. Vote red, red, red. Save our republic. Until next time, God bless you. Take care. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you on election day.
Yay.